127, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, widely known as the Mighty OGO. I'd like to welcome back Mr. Doan. Before we start, I wish to go over a few things. We've agreed to some accommodation measures for our witness today. Mr. Doan will be making an opening statement. We're going to do a 5-minute break after the first round, a 5-minute break after the second round. After the third round, which will take us about halfway through, give or take, we'll provide a 10-minute break. And then after a round after that will be a 5-minute break. Mr. Doan, obviously, is appearing by video conference. He's accompanied by his counsel, and we will allow suspensions or breaks for Mr. Doan to refer to his counsel, at which time we will suspend the clock so you don't miss out on your questioning. Mr. Doan is aware that his counsel, though, has to remain off camera at all times. If any time Mr. Doan's health does not permit him to continue his testimony, the meeting could be suspended or adjourned, provided Mr. Doan accepts that he will be required to reattend to complete the testimony in the future. Just on a different point, colleagues, I'd like to remind members that as with any testimony and documentation received by any parliamentary committee of this House, the proceedings today are covered by parliamentary privilege, which means that they cannot be used against any of us, including the witness, in a court of law in this country. This allows us to proceed to our inquiry with complete freedom. I refer members to the House of Commons Standing Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, aka Boss Gagnon, aka the Green Book, page 89 to 95 for your reference. Mr. Doan, again, welcome back. We'll start with your opening statement. Go ahead, sir.
Point of order, Chair.
Yep. I have two, but sorry, Mr. Doan. I'll get you actually just in 2 seconds. Before we get to the first point of order, and then Ms. Vignola, normally we're quite a bit liberal with watching the clock. Today, I am going to keep everyone to exactly to 5 minutes or 6 minutes. So leave time for an answer. I will be cutting everyone off exactly at that time. Mr. Brock?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As I indicated to the last time that this witness appeared at committee last fall, that given the contentious nature of the evidence, that it would be prudent to have the witness sworn to tell the truth, and I'll be making that request again today.
I was expecting that. I think Mr. Doan was probably expecting that as well. If we're fine, we'll turn it over to the clerk for that. And then we'll get to Mrs. Vignola, but let me just attend to this first, Mrs. Vignola. Sure.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
No, sorry, I'm going to turn over to the clerk to just swear in the witness, then I'll get to Mrs. Vignola. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Doan, with a hand on the religious text of your choice, well, you have two options. You can perform serment, an oath, or you can choose to make a solemn affirmation. What would you like to choose?
I'll do a solemn affirmation.
Solemn affirmation. So please repeat after me. I, Minh Doan, do solemnly, sincerely, and truly affirm and declare the taking of any oath is, according to my religious belief, unlawful.
I, Minh Doan, do solemnly, sincerely, and truly affirm and declare the taking of any oath according to my religious belief unlawful.
And I do also solemnly, sincerely, and truly affirm and declare that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
And I do also solemnly and sincerely and truly affirm and declare that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Doan. Mrs. Vignola?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure that sound tests were done in compliance with our regulations for the well-being of our interpreters.
They were done. Mr. Doan, sorry for the interruption. Please proceed with your opening statement.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and honorable members of the committee. Like most Canadians, I would prefer to not make my health issues public. However, as a result of some comments made in this committee, this is no longer possible. In 2015, I had a heart attack, was rushed to the hospital, underwent emergency surgery, and had 2 stents installed. I've had attacks of angina since. Stress has direct and life-threatening ramifications for me, and I've been on medical leave since January of this year, and I'm still currently on medical leave. There's nothing convenient about heart disease. I'm here today against my doctor's advice to avoid stress because I want to set the record straight on some points. Before speaking to the specific issues, I want to thank the committee for the accommodations it has extended to me, including delaying my appearance and for my appearance today. First, my involvement in the ArriveCAN development. As CIO, my role is to provide strategic IT direction. My role was not to determine specifically how a program was to be delivered at an operational level. Once I made a strategic decision, responsibility for the technical implementation was delegated to a senior executive at the EX3 level to get the job done. Who chose GC strategies continues to be asked. The problem with this question is there are 2 questions and 2 answers, not one. I've already made clear at my last appearance that I picked a strategic direction to use in-house resources with staff augmentation. I'm accountable for that decision and I stand behind it. However, I did not decide on a company. When I was presented with the 2 options, the staff augmentation proposal contained only technical information and did not include any information regarding GC strategies. They were never mentioned, nor did I make any decision to specifically engage them. This leads me to the other important question that isn't being asked. Who brought GC strategies on board? How are they even aware of CBSA's urgent need for an app? Who asked them for proposals or mockups? Who had a relationship with them dating back years before the pandemic? That clearly was not me. In sworn affidavits recently filed in the federal court by Mr. McDonald and Mr. Utano, I quote from Mr. McDonald's affidavit, Mr. Utano was involved in exploring options to be presented. The internal group of which Utano was part of ultimately recommended GC strategies as the solution. With respect to Deloitte, I also quote from Mr. Utano's affidavit, Deloitte would have developed the application entirely within their operation, while GC strategies would employ a series of external programmers who would develop the application such that the CBSA could operate and modify the application once CBSA personnel were trained. Those are their words, not mine. I had no telephone calls with GC strategies. I've seen reported in the Globe and Mail that others had hundreds of phone calls with them, not only during COVID, but dating back 2 years before the pandemic even began. I did not attend any events with GC strategies, nor was I even invited to these events. Bottler's initial report supports that I did not have a relationship with GC strategies. It also noted conscious efforts by members of my team to hide information from me. Secondly, on the allegation that I moved files around to intentionally delete emails to hide evidence, this is false. I needed to change my laptop because the battery on my current one was failing. When transferring files from my old computer to my new one, files were corrupted and the emails were lost. I personally reported this to my team to attempt recovery of the emails. I believe CBSA still has these laptops and files in their possession. Everyone knows emails do not solely reside on a particular computer or laptop. They are delivered through servers where they are usually backed up. In the case of CBSA, the servers in question are under control of another department, Shared Services Canada. More importantly, all recipients, senders, and people on CC would still have copies of their emails with me and could have produced them as required. Neither I nor anyone else can delete other individuals' copies of emails. The loss of emails from my laptop would not result in them no longer existing anywhere else. As a member of the executive team at CBSA at the time, I accept responsibility for the institutional and public service accountability for what occurs within the organization and learn from the findings and recommendations when policies and programs are not proceeded with according to the rules in place, as was highlighted in the OAG and OPO reports. At the same time, when I delegate a task to be completed by those under my authority, particularly to individuals at senior executive EX3 levels, I should reasonably be able to expect that they will do so in accordance with all applicable standards, laws, and regulations, that they will flag to me things that require my attention. This is core to how delegation works. In this case, it appears my trust was misplaced. In hindsight, knowing what I know now, I should have asked more questions and challenged more of those reporting to me. For those failures, I take full responsibility. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Doan. We'll start with Mr. Barrett for 6 minutes, please.
Mr. Doan, you're the Chief Technology Officer of Canada. How long have you been working with computers and IT?
Over 25 years.
And you have training in computer science?
I do.
Do you have an accreditation?
I have a bachelor's degree in computer science.
Would you describe yourself as an IT expert?
I would.
You know how to code, secure data, program, you understand how computer networks work or operate?
I haven't coded in quite a while, but I do.
So there are investigations now ongoing about the missing emails, deleted emails. And I just want to make sure I understand correctly from your opening statement. Your contention is that because you switched the battery out in your laptop, thousands of records were deleted. I am not a computer expert, but I've switched out batteries a couple of times, and I've never heard of that happening. Would you say that that's quite common?
Pour clarifier, je n'ai pas changé la batterie de...
Let me clarify. I did not change the battery of my computer. I needed to change the computer as a whole. I was not merely changing the battery of my computer.
To change the whole computer, and in the imaging process, someone wiped your computer? I just don't understand. This is not something that I've heard of. Usually there's quite robust processes. The IT staff here at the House of Commons, for example, in my experience with IT working with Department of National Defense, I've never heard of anything like this. And it's just, it seems incredible to believe that that's the story that you'd have us accept today. But it's incredibly convenient for you that these documents are missing. So how is it that you're both the victim of something that's exceedingly rare, but also the beneficiary of something that's exceedingly helpful for you?
Thank you for the question. Corrupt, what the technical term is corrupt PSTs. Corrupt PSTs are actually not exceedingly rare, fairly common. It's actually so common that Microsoft put a tool in every Windows computer to fix them. In terms of what you say, it is absolutely correct. You get a new computer, it is imaged, but in transferring, no different than if you were to get a home computer on a new home computer, you would want to transfer files from your old one to your new one. So in that transfer, that is where the corruption occurred. So it was fairly standard. You transfer files over and there was a corruption. That's what occurred.
So as Chief Technology Officer of Canada, the practices that are in place currently now see quite commonly that when government employees swap out their hardware, that thousands of files go missing. And, with that being your contention, isn't that being, the state of play, your accepted standard, doesn't that compromise your ability to abide by federal law and information retention policies?
So when this occurred, I was not the Chief Technology Officer of the Government of Canada. I was the CIO of CBSA. And in terms of the question that I failed to answer earlier, you asked is it convenient for me? I don't know how having my files corrupted would be convenient to me in any way at all. So in terms of your other question, how often does it occur and is it a common occurrence? I think corrupted files is a common occurrence. How often does it occur when different government employees change laptops or computers and that occurs? I could not speak to that.
A minute and a half. The destruction of emails and other documents, of course, are relevant to the information requests as it relates to allegations about your involvement in the $60 million ArriveScam and involvement with GC Strategies. Of course, the destruction would be to your benefit if you were attempting to cover up your activities, attempting to camouflage things that you had done. we've seen in the past, prevarications by you at committee, and we found that the main contractor, the favored contractor, also lied before committee. The Information Commissioner of Canada is investigating you destroying these documents and evidence. Have you been interviewed as part of that investigation?
Non, personne m'a contacté de ce.
No, no one has contacted me from that office. To come back to what I said at the beginning, the fact that there was corruption of files are no longer on my computer, it doesn't mean that those emails don't exist any longer. All those emails exist in email boxes of all those who received emails from me. It's the same for any of you members.
Dozens, if not hundreds of other people's computers. It makes the investigation exceedingly difficult when the agency you were with at the time has now been noted to have of the worst record keeping that's been seen in the history of the federal government. It's again far too convenient and simply not believable what you're offering, sir.
I'm afraid that is our time. Mr. Jouari, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Doan, for coming to the committee. A couple of quick questions, and then I want to go to the emails. First of all, I'm sorry to hear that you had health issues. It is unfortunate. Can you confirm that you have received the accommodation for appearing in this committee as you had requested?
I can confirm that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And can you also confirm that everything that you have so far said to this committee has been honest and has been truthful?
I also confirm that everything I've said so far has been honest and truthful.
Yeah. So you also, in your opening remarks, you talked about Mr. McDonald as well as Mr. Utano testimonies, and you read from their testimonies, and you believe that their testimony is truthful and it's against what's been said about you?
To clarify, it was not, I didn't read that from testimony. That was from affidavits, sworn affidavits from their part with the Federal Court of Canada.
And in their affidavit, basically, are they, as a clarification, are they supporting your testimony, or they're disputing your testimony?
From their affidavits, they are supporting. The question that keeps coming back is who picked GC Strategies and who knew them, who contacted them. And as I quoted, and I'm happy to quote again, it is ultimately recommended the GC Strategies as the solution. That would have been Mr. Otano.
Okay. Thank you for those clarifications. Now, I want to go back to the email, and I'm going to draw on an experience that I had recently. Our computers all when my personal computer, when I was doing an upgrade on a computer, all my Outlook files were saved in an Outlook folder, and that was backed up. And when I got my new computer, those files were transferred, and then I brought up Outlook, and it came up. Now, as it relates to my work computer, I did not touch it because basically someone from IT came, took my computer, and they went and did the re-imaging. We got a new computer coming back. They came back to the office. They spent about 30 minutes with me. They make sure everything is up, and they validated it. So I didn't have access to any of my files to be able to do a transfer similar to experience that I had when I brought my own computer, my personal computer up. Now, why would you, given the fact, and I understand the fact you're IT savvy, why wouldn't you go to the IT and tell them, hey, look, here's my computer, the battery is dead. Can you get me a new computer and please take care of it? I wouldn't assume CIO of a department will have time to be able to go and do all of that on their own. Can you clarify that, please?
Yes, of course. As was previously alluded to, I've been in technology my entire life. I'm a proud technologist. I'm a proud geek and nerd around that. And part of the IT team that reported to me, and many people will attest, they are also those that provide VIP service are extremely busy, providing help for the other vice presidents and DMs of the agency. So anytime I could on my own solve what I believe to be a fairly straightforward thing, such as a file transfer, I would do that.
I understand. Somehow you seem to have access as a CIO of CBSA. You seem to have access to the file that was saved on the Outlook folder within the Government of Canada, CBS, whatever that folder is called. Does everyone have access to similar folder?
I'm familiar with the setup that you talked about, that in terms of what we would call traditionally a network share or a common share, where you're, in your case, the files would have been saved. Here, this was a file these were files that I wanted to transfer from my local computer to the new computer I received. So these were not from what you were referring to as a network drive.
Okay, so those were the files. So are you telling me, or sorry, am I right to understand that you had saved work-related files on your personal computer, on a personal folder? I just wanted to make sure, because I'm not an IT guy. I understand IT, but I'm not an IT guy.
I had both. I had, as I mentioned in my opening statements, all emails are backed up on servers, and those servers are managed by another department. They're not managed by my team, not managed by the agency. So I have those backups. We also have backups of network drives, and those are managed by the CBSA IT. And I had my local files as well that I wanted to transfer over, maybe any kind of documents or pictures of my children or other things.
Yeah, so with 30 seconds to go, were you keeping Government of Canada emails on your local folder drive, and over thousands of emails all of a sudden got corrupted as a result of that? Just a yes or no.
No.
Thank you, sir. I don't understand that.
Thank you, Mr. Shari. Mrs. Vignola, for your 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Doan, for being here. I have had problems transferring files myself when I was changing my computer from my desktop to my Surface Pro. So I understand in part the problem that you experienced. I experienced that less than a month ago. It's frustrating, it's shocking, annoying, and it's disturbing because you have to start from scratch. And I'm not a computer nerd. So I'm sorry for that word I used. I don't know what the interpreter said. My first question has to do with verification, because during your testimony on the 24th of October 2023, when I reread that testimony, there were some clarifications I needed. You said it was your team that had taken the decision. And after that, you said the team was made up of 1,100 people under your supervision. That's a huge team. 1,400 people, rather. I understand that those 1,400 people were subdivided into smaller teams. So it's not 1,400 people who decided to choose GC strategies. Who made the decision? So I don't believe it's 1,400 people who made that decision. Who made that decision? Answer. Thank you for your question. Indeed, when I appeared, I gave an idea of my responsibilities. I was asked how many people were on the team, and the question was asked as to who made that decision. It was my team. Now, to come back to your question, I'll say what I said in my opening statement. It was members of my team. Of course, it wasn't the 1,400 people, 2 individuals, the individuals whose affidavits I read and talked about a few minutes ago. Thank you. Please remind me, I didn't quite hear you. when were your emails deleted? When did this email problem occur? Did it only concern emails that had to do with ArriveCAN? Answer, it was at the beginning of 2023 that this happened. Well, I did answer that question, so you heard me well. Now, to come back to the question that was asked by the member before you, it was not my personal computer. We do not have the right to work with our personal computers. It was a computer from the government of Canada, from the CBSA. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify that. Question, were these only ArriveCAN emails that were deleted, or were these emails that concerned many issues? Answer, when the files are corrupted, it's random. So it's not only files concerning a particular issue. These are technical corrupted files. Now let's come back to your testimony of the 24th of October. During your testimony, you said you were not the one who had made the decision. You had not been informed of complaints made by Butler, and that in the case of Butler, you were not made aware of the complaints that were lodged. What could be done to at that time you said you didn't know what could have been done to improve the procurement process. So now, what were your tasks as Chief Information Officer at the time? Now, let me come back to the point you raised before. I had 1,400 employees, 6 directors general. I was accountable for systems of the agency, but for all the tools that were used by the agency. So with the delegation of authorities, I had to focus on strategy, particularly technical strategies, and not on policy. I worked with colleagues, vice presidents, other vice presidents, and so on. And we determined the technical strategies. And I also trusted my directors general, depending on the situation, that they would find the best possible means of delivering on our objectives. I also had to inform myself or find out if they needed my help or if they needed to warn me about something I needed to know. So what I did was provide technical and strategic orientation and make sure that all technical deliverables met high-level standards. Very quickly, ultimately, who managed your team? Were you the only one who managed the team, or an entire team that managed the people? There was a hierarchy. Below me, I had 6 directors general who were responsible for others. So there was a hierarchy in place. And that's how it works well with the governance. So I did not directly manage 1,400 employees. Thank you.
Rack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Doan, for being with us today. I think I'll start with some matters concerning Bottler AI. And my understanding from Bottler is that they have still not been paid about $220,000 for work that they delivered. And if I understand correctly how they became involved in this, someone who worked for you went out and found Bottler AI and then convinced them to contact GC Strategies. And GC Strategies then got them to do some work for a CBSA project, and those deliverables were delivered. But as of today, they're still owed quite a bit of money. I'm wondering how that money could not have been paid to Bottler AI for the work that they did.
I believe that there are a few questions there, if I may try to address them as directly as possible. How they came to be has been an issue of contention, as you rightfully point out. There were testimony by some witnesses that it was an unsolicited proposal from GC Strategies. I've heard from the president of CBSA at this committee or another committee that it was actually, in fact, not an unsolicited proposal by this individual, and it is, as you say, this individual found this company and then asked them to work with GC Strategies, which is consistent with some of the social media messages that I've seen posted by bottlers. So I do believe your summary of events to be consistent with what I've seen in terms of testimony and evidence. In terms of other testimony, although I wasn't involved in the payment of bottlers, that was delegated to my team. What I'd heard from early testimony back in the late fall is that my understanding that they were paid for the 2 out of 6 modules that they had delivered, and that the contract was stopped. I would, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of details in terms of what payments were and were not made. I would perhaps redirect that question to CBSA, who would have all the details of which invoices and which modules were paid. But my understanding from testimony here was that they were paid for the work that they had completed and accepted.
So I guess the confusing part, Mr. Doan, is that if they delivered 6 modules and got paid for 2, what about the other 4? And I think that's where the contention lies. And I don't know if these are questions that you can answer, given your relationship to this work. But as I understand it, they were clearly asked to deliver all 6 of the deliverables, and they delivered all 6 of them, and then they were only paid for 2 of them. Is that your understanding of what's being alleged?
C'est pas ma compréhension de qu'est-ce qui...
That is my understanding of what happened. From what my information comes from what I heard from the other committees. I think there was an agreement for a pilot project that was going up to 6 modules. The client, given the nature of what they're working on, sexual harassment, AI, human resources. From what I understand is that of the 6 modules, they delivered on 2 that were accepted, and then the work stopped. So my understanding is not that they delivered on the 6 modules, but maybe my knowledge is not based on the most recent information, but my knowledge is based on what I heard in committee.
So, Mr. Doan, last time you were at committee, you said that your role was IT, not procurement. Which is something you've reiterated today. The Auditor General found that CBSA failed to use their procurement directorate to procure GC Strategies, but instead the Information Science and Technology branch worked directly with PSPC for contracting it. If, like by your own admission, you're not a procurement expert, why did you elect to not use the procurement experts in the CBSA procurement directorate?
Thank you for the question. It was during a time of a pandemic and emergency. I go back to what my opening statement and what I've said. I did not make that decision not to go through the procurement directorate. The decision once I've made the decision on direction for staff augmentation, the procurement itself was carried out by my delegated DG.
Moving on to some of the questions around, this is from a line of questioning from Mr. Barrett at one of our last meetings. And this is in which Mr. Barrett was questioning around the invitation to dinners or activities with vendors. And I believe this, Mr. Utano, Mr. McDonald indicated that he had been invited to dinners and that he had disclosed this to his supervisor. Mr. Utano says, the short answer is I was at one dinner and that was disclosed to my boss, who was Minh Doan at the time. Did Cameron McDonald or Antonio Utano disclose these to you?
I've only what were they called? Whiskey tastings and meetings at Lansdowne and other pubs. I've only learned of that recently as they came up in either the Globe and Mail or committee. Mr. McDonald did not disclose or ask, and that was something I've also seen in the OAG report. So they did not ask for permission and to attend these whiskey tastings or other meetings with, I believe, GC Strategies.
Thanks very much. That ends our first round. We're going to suspend for 5 minutes exactly. And Mr. Kusmerchuk will do your voice check right now. do this round and then do another 5-minute break. We'll start with Mr. Brock for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Doan, you'll agree with me that long before Mr. McDonald, Mr. Utano stated emphatically that you had lied to committee not once but numerous times, you in fact were friends with Cameron McDonald. Isn't that correct?
I would consider him a very close colleague that I got along with.
Yes. I'm looking at a text exchange from October the 24th, 2022, between yourself and Cameron McDonald, where you're joking around, talking about your upcoming appearance at committee. This was your first appearance. You were joking around saying, my first line at committee next week, Tina made me do it. My second line, Cameron McDonald, Mac, not Mick, Mr. Speaker, did everything behind my back. You were joking. Mr. McDonald knew you were joking. Mr. McDonald said, yes, this entire thing is brutal. And then you stated something very interestingly. You said, I quote, my issue isn't talking. I'm rather good at running my mouth. Now, I take that to mean I'm pretty good at telling tall tales. And I would suggest very strongly that's precisely what you have done on the last two committee appearances, and that's what you're starting to do right now. You are very good at telling lies, Mr. Doan. Furthermore, you continue, and Mr. McDonald says in response, ha ha, oh, I wasn't worried. You then said, my issue is what I want to say versus what I can say. Can't throw PHAC, public health, under the bus. Can't throw ministers under the bus. It's hard to explain the complexity and cost of this thing without doing that. So, several questions, Mr. Doan. Starting with PHAC. Who at PHAC are you trying to protect?
Thank you for the question. I'm not, first of all, I do not recall those exchanges. I'm not questioning them. I don't recall exchanges I sent 2 years ago. I send hundreds of texts a day. But in terms of protecting anybody, there is nobody to protect. In terms of the question of throwing people under the bus, the PHAC were the business owners. They defined the requirements. I think it was well stated here. There are, I believe, to memory, over 80 OICs. Those were not CVSA OICs. We had to react. We were working around the clock to meet the requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Doan. I only have 5 minutes. I'm reclaiming my time. To your point that you don't recall, these text messages are probably still on your phone, unless, of course, they mysteriously got deleted as well. Okay, so I encourage you to review your phone messages from just over a year and a half ago. Can't throw ministers under the bus. We already know about the difficulties you had with Minister Mendocino, who wanted someone's head on a platter, and you threatening Mr. McDonald to throw him under the bus. Are you still protecting Minister Mendocino?
Thank you for the question. Those are allegations and not facts, and they're allegations
Are
from
you
an
still
individual.
Mr. Doan? Very straightforward question. Are you still protecting Minister Mendocino, now known as MP Marco Mendocino? Yes or no?
No, I have no reason to protect him.
Then why would you say that emphatically in a text message? Why would you give the illusion that you want to say more, but you can't?
No.
You swore to tell the truth. You affirmed to tell the truth, not only today, but on your last appearance. You can't have it both ways. You can't just give us some of the evidence and hold back relevant details. Your affirmation is to give us the straight goods, Mr. Doan. No one forced you to write these text messages. This came from you. So what is it you really wanted to say, but you felt compelled that you couldn't? Who are you protecting, and what are you hiding, Mr. Doan? Is the relevant question. What are you hiding?
Mr. Chair, I'm trying to answer the member's question.
What are you hiding?
You have about 10 seconds.
I have nothing to hide. I have nobody to protect. It was a very stressful and difficult time, and we were responding to the pandemic and the needs of FAC and others.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Baines, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Doan, for joining us today. I'm just still a little bit confused about the files that were corrupted. How many did you say that were corrupted?
In terms of what we talked about here specifically, it would have been one file called a PST file.
One single file. What's on there? What was on there?
A PST file is a file that is used by Outlook to store emails and other things.
How many emails?
I couldn't tell you.
And when you lost those emails, did you say like, oh no, I've lost a lot of important information?
Oui, absolument. Et comme j'ai dit,
Yes, indeed. That is what I said during my open remarks. I'm the one who reported the matter to the team. It's well documented. I asked that they immediately start the process to recover the emails.
it's in email. I asked them to use either internal tools, services from other groups within the agency, such as the internal investigation, who I assume have extra tools to do this type of work.
Okay,
I
and
asked them to conduct shared
who's-
services.
Who is them? Who did that work?
My IT team that are responsible for technical support, and my main interface was my direct report at the time, the DG that was leading that IT team.
And were they able to successfully get some of this stuff back?
Not in the time that I needed, and then I also moved to a different department after that. But I believe the efforts are ongoing. But I would have to refer to CBSA to see what the status is. I know this is being currently investigated as well.
So those efforts are still ongoing. We at some point could possibly see these emails.
I can't speak on the efforts. I'm obviously not part of it, and I'm not part of the investigation and looking into this allegation. I have met with the investigator.
But you said the efforts are ongoing.
I believe the efforts are ongoing by CBSA.
Sorry, who's Diane Daly?
If memory serves, she was somebody that was in charge of financials or procurement under Mr. McDonald, and then subsequently under Mr. Utano when Mr. McDonald left, would be my memory.
And did you have a working relationship with Ms. Daly?
No, I do not. Or my apologies. No, I did not.
Were you then surprised to hear Christian Firth of GC Strategy say that Diane Daly was the public servant he met with where he was allegedly able to negotiate or provide technical recommendations for the original ArriveCAN contract?
Je m'attendais pas à ça.
I wasn't expecting that.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Je m'attendais pas à ça.
I wasn't expecting that.
Why not?
I would, following the testimony here, I would have thought that he would have dealt with somebody a little bit more senior in terms of dealing and negotiating things around contracting.
So Ms. Daly was a junior level officer in her work?
I can't tell you from memory. I didn't interact with her. I can't tell you from memory what level she was exactly, but if memory serves, she was not even an executive role. So she, in terms of specifics, she was not even what we would call an EX1, but I may be wrong there. She may have been acting.
So who would be the appropriate person Mr. Firth should have been talking to?
Talking to in terms of what, in what context?
You just said that you didn't expect that because you wouldn't expect him to meet with someone at her level. It would be somebody else. Who would that other person, the appropriate person, be to work on something like negotiating a contract or providing technical recommendations for this ArriveCAN?
I think what the OAG and others have shown to answer your question is that I don't know that there were a lot of appropriate contacts, but that's just based on what I've seen in reports in the Globe and Mail. In terms of also what I've seen in testimony and evidence is that his usual contacts would have been more Mr. McDonald and Mr. Otano.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Baines. Mrs. Vignola for 2.5, please.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let me come back to what you said in the past when I asked my questions. How come could you explain the fact that when Butler complained for the first time by email to Mr. Utano did not inform you, considering that he was directly reporting to you? He should have informed you, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you for the question. That comes back to something I said. Delegation works in that decisions are taken at different levels of the hierarchy. Different people can take different decisions. We assume that when those decisions are taken, the codes of practices are respected. So there's common sense respected. And when there's an issue, they have to tell me that there's a problem. I am managing it, but you must be aware of it, or I am not able to manage it. But I heard that efforts were made to hide a number of things from me, from what I heard from Butler, and things were not brought to my attention. Knowing what I know now, I think that he should have raised the matter with me. He could have said, I'm not dealing with that. He could have told me, boss, I'm taking care of that, but I need you to know. If you want me to do something else, I will do so. Thank you. In their testimony, Mr. Utano and Mr. McDonald said they were victims of harassment, or they may have been used as scapegoats to protect other people, including yourself. What is your reaction to these allegations and to the fact that Mr. Utano and Mr. McDonald are also accusing Butler of fraud? How would you react to these testimonies and allegations that have been made towards you and towards your management and testimony?
I'm afraid there's no time left to respond, but perhaps we can get back to that and Mrs. Vignola's next round. Mr. Bachrach for 2.5, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just returning to this question of dinners and entertainment with ArriveCAN contractors, and getting back to Mr. Utano's response to Mr. Barrett at a previous meeting. He says, the short answer is I was at one dinner and that was disclosed to my boss, who was Minh Doan at the time. In fact, my boss was present. Mr. Doan, were you indeed present at this dinner with ArriveCAN, at least one ArriveCAN vendor?
Thank you for the question. I was at a conference in Washington, D.C. that was put on by Amazon Web Services for public sector. At the end of I had approval from my superior to attend this conference, as was Mr. Utano. We were using AWS as our cloud service. And at the end of the last day of the conference, it was presented to me that there would be a group dinner with the Canadian delegation. So myself and Mr. Utano attended that meeting with AWS. They picked up the tab in the moment. I didn't push back. And because of this, I did not claim my meal for that dinner as part of my travel expenses.
Dinner disclosed as per the rules for disclosure?
It was part of a conference, and it was at the end, a conference that I had approval to attend. So I did not disclose that afterwards.
So you had approval to attend the conference, but not to go for a dinner with an ArriveCAN contractor who subsequently picked up the tab for that dinner. I guess it seems, if the rules are that you have to disclose when vendors buy you dinner, in this case, very clearly the vendor bought you dinner. It happened to be at a conference, after a conference, actually. Like, do you feel that you were acting within the bounds of the disclosure rules?
In terms of the conference, it was something that I had approval to, but to answer your question, it is something I regret. I should not even in the context of a group setting as part of what was presented as a Canadian delegation, I should not have accepted that dinner, and I should have disclosed it.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to Mrs. Block, please, for 5.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Doan, you have appeared at this committee twice before, and unfortunately, you have been evasive and refused to clearly answer direct questions, and we're seeing that again today. This has resulted in you asserting falsehoods, which have been refuted since your last appearance by witnesses that have since attended this committee. During your appearance on November 14th, 2023, and again today in your opening remarks, you stated in relation to the 2 options for ArriveCAN that were presented to you that there was no company associated with the second option. And that's a quote from your testimony on November 14th. And this was in reference to the GC strategies option, which I believe you reiterated again today. However, Mr. Doan, we have been given the slide decks of the 2 options which were presented to you, both the Deloitte slide deck and the GC strategies slide deck. And what we can see on the Deloitte slide deck, there is no logo or anything to indicate which company is behind that option. Yet you knew that it was Deloitte. On the GC strategies slide deck, there was the logo of their primary subcontractor, Distill Mobile. Yet you claim to have had no knowledge of which company was responsible for this option. Why did you lie to this committee at that time?
Thank you for the question. My opening statement, I was very specific that there were no mention of GC strategies. I did not say there were no company logos. I did hear testimony about this Distill Mobile. When I went back into the records after hearing that testimony, there are many versions of that particular deck that you spoke of that was developed in a very short period of time. There was early on Distill Mobile, which it's not GC strategies. And should I have known that Distill Mobile was the subcontractor at that time of GC strategies? I did not. And then you will also see in evidence that I believe CBSA can or has provided that subsequent to the different versions that were coming fast and furious, the later versions of that deck, the Distill Mobile logo mysteriously disappears as well. But in my opening remarks, I did not say that there were no company logos. I specifically said there was not a reference to GC strategies.
Correct. And I would suggest that that is just an example of an evasive answer, which you could have provided at the time. In your opening remarks or in response to a question earlier in this committee, you indicated that as the lead on this team, you should have asked more questions, that this was your team, that you take responsibility, and yet it would seem that you continue not to take responsibility and provide evasive answers to the questions that you are being asked. During your appearance before this committee on October 24th, 2023, you indicated that your hiring at Treasury Board was through a competitive process. You stated, and I quote, "I was in the middle of a competitive process with Treasury Board. However, we have since learned from Treasury Board officials that you were not hired through a competitive process. We were told that you," and I quote, "came over at level, and they clarified that it was non-competitive." Again, you lied to this committee. You were given this new cushy job at the Treasury Board, despite your failures at CBSA. I'm thinking you must have had a pretty good reference. Could you share with us today who your references were for your move to the Treasury Board?
Those were not my statements. The question was, did I receive a non-advertised? I did. I was an EX4, a CIO at CBSA. I was in a process for an EX5 with Treasury Board, and this can be verified. I was at the interview stage. That is when CBSA learned that it was in a EX5 process, and they counter-offered with a non-advertised EX5. So this continues to be consistent with what I said last time. Then when I moved over to as the chief technology officer, it was a lateral. It was not a promotion. It was a lateral move. I was already in the X5.
Mr. Chair,
That is
I
our
asked-
time, I'm afraid. Ms. Atwin, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Doan, for being with us. I'd like to go back to the text message exchange that Mr. Brock was referring to. I'd like you to expand, if you would be able to, this idea about not being able to throw PHAC under the bus or throw ministers under the bus, and specifically the part about it's hard to explain the complexity and cost of this thing without doing that. Please, for the sake of all of our understanding, can you explain the complexity and cost of this, and specifically what you were alluding to? Again, you don't remember this exchange, but I think you can read into it now that we really like this information. So could you please explain that?
Thank you for the opportunity. So as a matter of principle, I don't, throwing people or blaming people without merit is not part of who I am. Last time I was here for 2.5 hours under oath, I still did not blame anybody. So the complexity of this application, there was 177 versions. There were, I believe, to memory, over 80 OICs. They were changing almost every 4 weeks, if not shorter. And sometimes the OICs themselves were changing up to the last minute. And what we had to do as the technology team is we had to code, recode, adjust, test, and I understand that from the OIUG, our testing wasn't sufficient on those timeframes, but we had to respond to this. So it wasn't a question of the complexity and the cost of this was because of anybody. It was responding to the health measures, evolving pandemic, vaccines, mandatory random testing, the different measures for excluded groups. So the context of that was I need to be able to explain why this application, what became so complex. No, it cannot be coded over one weekend for $25,000. It was very complex. It had different components. It had different measures. Changes were added to it at the very last minute. And it's not about blaming anybody for that. It is the reality of my FAC colleagues of health and the evolving pandemic, not only in the country, but around the world as well.
Thank you very much. And just the last piece of that text exchange we have is that I have to stay in my lane. Were you receiving any pressures to say or to not say anything with regards to the ArriveCAN app?
Non, pas du tout. Je suis la personne de technologie.
I am the technology person. I'm not responsible for communications. I'm not responsible for policies, nor for the OICs. I can't speak to health measures. So for me, I was really going to talk about technology. I cannot claim to know the other issues that had to do with the OICs. There were so many OICs that was not within my domain of expertise. So I wanted to focus on my domain, which is IT.
And we mentioned, earlier that you clearly had a friendly, I would describe, relationship with Mr. McDonald, or you mentioned it was a close colleague. How would you describe your relationship now with Mr. McDonald?
Listen, because of allegations that were made in this forum more than once, it has, as I said, directly affected my health. I'm on medical leave. I'm using medical leave that I've saved as good public servants do over years and decades. It has affected my health. The social media has been extremely horrible. My kids are old enough to read, unfortunately, and Google. I've heard of, because I'm avoiding social media, tweets out there that tell me I should go back to China. As a proud immigrant who became a public servant to serve and give back to this country, you can imagine how that feels. And a lot of this is, if I may be so direct, were because of allegations mostly stemming from testimony by Mr. McDonald and Mr. Utano. So no, I wouldn't qualify our relationship now as friendly.
Thank you, and I'm sorry to hear about those comments in particular. You mentioned in your opening statement that there's a conscious effort to hide information from you. Who is doing this, and what kind of information do you believe is being withheld from you?
That is a quote of what I heard from, so I do not have, there was a Bottler report that in some respects started all of this, a report of wrongdoing and misconduct. I think it was well quoted in the Globe and Mail, and in one of the earlier meetings in the fall following the Globe and Mail article, one of the members was quoting parts of that report. I do not have access to that report. I've never seen that report. And what I heard from that quote of the report was that there was deliberate efforts from individuals in my team to keep information away from vice presidents, and I was the vice president at the time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Atwood. Ms. Doan, we're now going to go to our second 5-minute suspension before our next round. Doing one more round, then we'll get to a 10-minute break. We're starting with Mr. Genuis, then Mr. Souza. Go ahead, Mr. Genuis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. So Mr. Doan, I'm trying to put together the picture here. In the context of the ArriveScam story, one big issue is missing records. The Auditor General has identified this as a key issue, records that should be there that aren't there that would help us understand what happened in this whole fiasco. The fact that the records don't exist or can't be found means that they either were never created or they were at some point destroyed. Now, you are one of the figures involved in discussion of the ArriveCAN issue. And in the midst of this, we see very significant and detailed allegations around your files disappearing. And if I understand your testimony today, your files encountered some kind of a technical problem, and then you undertook a kind of a do-it-yourself on your computer. And you explain this do-it-yourself procedure you undertook because the IT folks are very busy. Now, you're a senior public servant. I would think that you're very busy as well. It would seem odd to me if a CEO at a big company said that he's just going to schedule his own meetings because his secretary and scheduler are very busy. Nonetheless, you undertook a DIY on your own computer outside of protocol, and in the process, something went wrong, and files disappeared. And at the same time, we have a problem of missing records that make it harder for us to understand what happened with the whole ArriveScam issue. Is my description broadly correct in terms of your testimony, or have I missed something?
In terms of, I didn't attempt to fix anything. So I had identified to me that my battery was about to go, and I needed on my current work laptop at the time. Et avant de tout perdre, donc si la batterie.
Before losing everything, I needed to get a new laptop. So when I did the transfer, as you say, the DIY.
Kind of a Control-C and a Control-V. So it was copy one file.
Okay, Mr. Doan, I know you've been trained on how to testify at committees, and I don't want you to run my whole time. I did ask a fairly clear question, I think. You had testified earlier, and you're testifying now, that you undertook work that would normally be done by designated IT professionals. Instead of calling in the designated IT team, you went and did it yourself. Is that correct? I mean, that's essentially what you said earlier.
Yes, I copied a file into the network and copied it onto my new computer.
Okay. In the process of doing that, files were accidentally damaged, and that has led to a situation in which it's hard to find these records. According to this IT employee who spoke to the Globe and Mail, the fact that you didn't engage the proper IT professionals for this is extremely unusual. It's outside of the proper protocol. You contacted an individual IT employee directly at one point instead of going through the proper process. I mean, how are we to find you credible, sir? And I want to give you the benefit of the doubt here, but how are we to find your testimony credible that, given how central missing records is to this whole story, that you, one of the central figures in this story, undertook to go outside the normal protocol to manipulate things on your computer on your own, and in the process, files were corrupted and disappeared? Like how are we to believe credibly that you were just trying to save the folks in IT some time as a senior manager, and something just happened to go wrong?
At the beginning of 2023, OAG report was not out. You mentioned missing records. Missing records was not a discussion or a point at that time. So to imply that I would have done anything specific for missing records, I didn't. In terms of the IT
sir, that timeline has no relevance at all. I'm almost out of time. Why did you undertake this do-it-yourself on your computer? What is the real reason why you didn't use the proper protocol?
I'm
Because I was highlighted.
Sorry, Mr. Doan, I have to interrupt here because we are out of time, but perhaps Mr. Genwis can get back to that in his next intervention. Mr. Sousa for 5.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Doan, has any member of this committee attempted to contact you outside of appearing before this committee?
No.
Have you shared any information with any elected officials around this committee or within the ministry? Elected officials, that
No.
being? Has any
No.
minister attempted to talk to you or direct you to make a decision or prepare you
No.
for today? Do you know if any members of this committee have had outside discussions with Mr. Otano or Mr. McDonald, or that they were contacted by members of this committee regarding this investigation? Are you aware of any of that occurring?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. I saw from other committees that happened.
Certain members have been in touch with Mr. Otano and Mr. McDonald, so at least that's what I saw and that's what I heard.
So you're aware that CBSA has been investigating Mr. Otano and Mr. McDonald. Of course, there was a preliminary statement of facts that was divulged, I believe, to members of this committee prior to others being available. Do you know of that? Are you aware of that content?
I'm aware as far as what I've heard at committee.
Do you believe that the witnesses that we've heard from, particularly Mr. McDonald and Mr. Otano, that they provided honest and truthful testimony? Do you believe that that was the case?
No. So there are many cases in terms of the allegations specifically made against me, and some of them extremely hurtful. One comes to mind that I faked a heart attack. My health situation is nobody's business. First of all, it's personal, it's private. It's not something I wanted shared. My heart attack is well documented. My cardiac disease is well documented. I'm followed by a cardiologist, and then to sit here and imply that I faked a heart attack, I would say that's the most extreme version of lying that I can think of.
Mr. Doan, are you being investigated? Do you know if the RCMP is investigating you?
I have not been contacted by the RCMP.
So you are aware that Mr. O'Donnell, Mr. Utano, and Mr. McDonald have had some investigations. They've had some disciplinary action. You're aware that members of this committee have decided to go out and beyond the scope of this committee to directly deal with them during an investigation by the Auditor General, the Ombudsman, and of course, CBSA. Do you feel that that's an obstruction of the investigation? Do you feel that that's putting at risk, ultimately, the truth that we're trying to get down to?
I couldn't opine on if that's an obstruction. I do wonder why certain things are occurring the way they are, where the flow of information from these witnesses and perhaps some from privilege that they have of sharing information that I do not, or preview information. But I couldn't opine on if that's an obstruction of justice or not. That's not really my domain of expertise.
Your domain, though, is around IT. And you've been talking at length today about losing, and you've talked about the corrupt file that has gone missing. But you have already stated that that file is available either on the cloud or on the mainframe or something. So advise this committee what is required now to retrieve the missing file that exists. It doesn't exist on your computer, but it exists elsewhere. What is required to retrieve that?
Thank you for the question. So to my knowledge, CBSA still has my old laptop and my new laptop, including any files on there. There are quite a number of recovery services available, either the private sector and others, to recover files and hard drives that have even been burned. There are services available. What services CBSA has undertaken so far, I can't speak to. I'm not aware of, although I know there's an investigation. And I think more importantly, as I said at the beginning, these emails do not only exist on on this laptop. Anybody I sent an email to, anybody CC'd would still have copies. Anybody that sent me emails that they would like to provide as evidence, even if they were presumably gone from my laptop, they could provide, say, I sent this email on this date to Mr. Doan, and all these other people CC'd would have a copy as well. So there are a number of measures possible, as well as some of the backups that would be available on shared services servers, because email was not managed by CBSA.
So if we were to seek out and reference that file in the name of McDonald Doan, we can find it. It's available to us.
I would defer that to CBSA and where they are on the investigation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mrs. Vignola for 2.5.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Doan, let me come back to my previous question, which was, what do you think about the fact that Mr. Utano and Mr. McDonald stated that they are being used as scapegoats to protect people, including yourself? What is your reaction towards those allegations? Following on what I said before, with all that happened with my health, my reputation, my career, all the unbelievable experiences I was going through, I don't really feel protected, I must say. That being said, why will they be scapegoats to protect me? I don't know why I will be protected more than any other public servant. I am a public servant. I'm a member of the public service. I do not see why the agency or the public service will want to protect me more than someone else. I was acting in good faith. I don't know if they acted in good faith, whether they are scapegoats or not. I can answer that. Question. In excerpts from the text messages or conversations between GC Strategies and Butler, GC Strategies is supposed to have told Butler that public servants were protecting themselves because they all had negative information about one another that could bring them down. So I think it's from that Utano and McDonald were saying that they are being used as scapegoats. Do you have any information about Utano and McDonald, or do you think that those people were friends and collaborators? I engaged directly with McDonald. I promoted him. I would not have done that if I did not have respect for their integrity or their capacity. It's just because from the fall of last year, when all happened, allegations came out. But before that, I had a lot of respect for those individuals. So no, I did not have any bone to pick with them. They were not my friends. They were not relatives. They were colleagues. Our relationship was a professional one. We talked about our kids maybe, but most often we spoke about our work.
Please.
Mr. Chair, this is going to sound like, if we could count the number of hours that we've talked about this particular email file, I think it would be fairly significant. And yet this question of where the emails are still seems to hang out there. If I understand your testimony correctly, Mr. Doan, the backup of your emails lives on a shared services server somewhere, correct? And so you had a problem with the corruption of your computer, and I think everyone around this table can relate to that because at some point in our lives we've had something similar happen, and it's very frustrating. But it does seem like in this case you solved the problem. And so am I correct in stating that all those emails are now back on your new computer and have been restored? I see people shaking their heads. That's not their understanding.
As I mentioned, this is being investigated. So were they able to recover it either from backups from shared services or recovery services on the hard drive? I couldn't speak to. I know, and to my knowledge, shared services who provide email services for a number of departments, they do have backups. They have backups of server emails. They have backups of Exchange servers. So there would be different services available to CFSO.
It just seems to me to be a non-issue. And if the committee's serious about getting copies of the emails, all we have to do is order the production of the emails from shared services, from wherever the server lives, and they're compelled to produce them. It seems as simple as that. So perhaps we can talk more about whether that's necessary and whether that's something the committee wants to pursue. But it does seem like we've spent a fair bit of time trying to figure out the personal IT travails of one individual. Moving on to another topic, Mr. Chair, how many seconds do I have left here?
35.
35. I'm wondering about the processes that you know, if my understanding of this conversation is essentially that you had people working under you at CBSA who are responsible for all sorts of things, but you couldn't really track what they were all doing because there were so many of them and they were doing so many different things. What processes, like as a supervisor, there must be processes and protocols by which you exercise accountability for the work of the people working under you. What processes and accountability systems were in place and did you follow in order to ensure that the people working for you weren't breaching protocols and rules and all of these sorts of things that we've been talking about?
Yeah, and I apologize, but we're past our time, so perhaps we can get back to it in 25 minutes for Mr. Backrack's next intervention, if you can give it some thought, Mr. Doan. We're not, no, sorry, going to go to Mr. Barrett for 5 minutes.
I want to follow up on Mr. Bain's question. Chair, does the committee agree to send for the recovery request referred to by Mr. Doan? Yeah, okay. Great. So, Mr. Doan, I want to be clear about the job that you're in now, the Chief Technology Officer of Canada. Did you get that position through a competitive process, yes or no?
No, it was a lateral.
It was a lateral move. That
When you're looking for a promotion, you have to compete for it. A lateral move, there's no competition because I'm not changing levels.
So when you went to the Treasury Board, it was a lateral move.
I was an EX5 at CBSA when I left. So that is a level of executive. And when I moved to the Treasury Board, I stayed an EX5. I didn't move levels. I did not change levels.
I don't understand, because when you came before committee in October of last year, my colleague, Ms. Kuzi, asked you this very question. She referred to it as a substantive process. But in response, you said, and I quote, "I was in the middle of a competitive process." So I mean, we've heard your answer today and we've heard your answer then. Your answer has changed. I know the answer is that it was not a competitive process, because we have that testimony from that TBS already, from the Treasury Board Secretariat. It's very interesting. Who were your references for that change in jobs? Just the name of who your references were, please.
So Catherine Lilo, who was the Government of Canada CIO at the time, made me the offer. Who she consulted and who she asked, I do not know.
Job.
I would presume it would have been my deputy minister at the time.
And who was?
At the time, it was when I moved over, Ms. Erin O'Gorman, and the one she probably would have talked to my previous deputy minister as well, which was John Ossowski.
And so this job wasn't publicly advertised?
It was not, to my knowledge, publicly advertised.
Okay. You took issue previously with testimony from Mr. Cameron McDonald that during a phone call that you had threatened him. Do you remember refuting that you had threatened him?
I do remember that allegation.
Remember saying that you hadn't threatened him?
He was in a different department. He wasn't even working for me anymore. I was calling him.
So yes or no, did you threaten him or did you not threaten him?
No, I did not threaten him.
We know that you have previously been fined for threatening a fellow public servant. Is that correct?
That is incorrect.
It is incorrect?
That is incorrect.
So have you ever had any allegations of you making threats against another individual?
I have a personal matter that was brought to my attention, and a family matter that I did not disclose, but I had never threatened another individual, another public servant.
Okay. Did that matter come before the courts?
No, it did not.
In the reporting process with respect to Mr. McDonald, did Ted Gallivan ever speak to you about the threats against Mr. McDonald?
Merci pour la question. La première fois,
Thanks for the question. The first time I heard about those allegations of threats is when Mr. McDonald came to this committee in the fall of 2023. That's the first time I heard about that.
Chair, I'll just ask for a little bit of extra time because the witness is switching back and forth, and so it's taking translation extra time. Well, I'm not sure if he's doing it for my benefit or for his, but it's
You're burning up your own time, but why don't we continue?
Yeah. Thanks very much, Julie. Appreciate the attempt at help there. Multiple times at the committee, we've heard you give answers that aren't clear, sir. Looking to you both use up time and to be unclear in what it is that you're trying to say. We've seen the text messages that you were concerned about throwing a minister under the bus, and you and Cameron McDonald getting your stories straight. Why was that your priority instead of just simply telling the truth to parliamentarians who were asking you questions?
Very brief answer.
I don't remember trying to get my story straight. I was actually calling Mr. McDonald for facts that we do not have, and frankly, to this day, the investigation is ongoing, which is who brought GC Strategies into the CBSA. So I was not trying to get a story straight. Nobody at CBSA at the time can answer the question. He was closest to it. He was the DG in charge reporting to me, and I called him for more information. He cordially, after this alleged threat.
Gentlemen, let us our time. Mr. Kuzmierczuk, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Doan, for appearing here today under difficult circumstances. In his previous testimony, I want to go back to the issue of deleting emails. In his previous testimony in front of this committee, Mr. McDonald said, and I quote, "I'm very concerned that thousands of emails have been deleted to hide the truth." And he goes on to state, my last comment would be just this. I think it's pretty clear that tens of thousands of emails were deleted by Minh Doan. I just wanted to ask you, would someone with the technical expertise as Cameron McDonald, would he be aware that emails deleted on a laptop would still exist, as you say, on a server?
Yeah, it would exist both on a server and, as I mentioned in my opening statement, they would exist on every other computer and laptop that they would have received.
My question, Mr. Doan, is would Mr. Cameron be aware, having with his technical expertise, would he be aware that those emails could still be retrieved if someone wanted to retrieve them? Would he know that?
Thank you for the question. You'll understand if I'm not inclined to suppose what Mr. McDonald is or is not aware of.
Okay, I understand. Would someone with a fairly, with expertise, technical expertise, IT expertise, background, would they know that, is it fair to expect that they would know that, again, emails could be deleted on a laptop, but yet still exist on a server and still be able to be retrieved?
I would assume someone with rudimentary knowledge would know that, especially when it comes to government servers. And it comes to, you can't delete anything from the internet. You can't make an email disappear once it's sent or received. You cannot do that. It's just, it is impossible. So anything that I said is sent, there are backups of backups, there are backups of servers, depending on if multiple servers are involved. Each server has their own backup routine, and emails exist everywhere. You just cannot make an email disappear because you deleted it on your laptop or computer.
I guess the reason I'm just asking the question is I'm wondering why someone like Mr. McDonald, who has IT expertise that I imagine is beyond basic rudimentary IT expertise, would talk about deleting the deletion of emails. And perhaps not be aware that those emails could be retrieved at will. That's the reason that I was asking that question to you. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Doan, as well too. We've heard in previous testimony that Mr. Firth from GC Strategies, there's accusations that GC Strategies was working with public officials to design bid criteria or recommend bid criteria. Is this appropriate in your experience for a vendor to approach and work together with a public servant on bid criteria?
Merci pour la question. J'avais lu les mêmes.
Thank you. I found the same thing in the OEG's report, and the short answer is no. It's a competitive process, but by the nature of the competition, it's open to many people. And here, if one person influences the terms of the competition, there will be a competitive advantage. So the short answer is no. It's not an acceptable practice in the government and elsewhere where there's a competition.
Okay, thank you. In his previous testimony, Mr. Otano stated, and I quote, "We were not responsible for signing contracts as we did not have contracting authorities. We were not responsible for selecting GC Strategies to work on ArriveCAN. This was Minh Doan's and John Osofsky's decision." Can you speak to that?
Yes. So as I said in my opening statement, there are sworn affidavits with the Federal Court of Canada where Mr. Otano contradicts, and Mr. Otano and Mr. McDonald contradicts what you've just read back to me. And their affidavits are very clear. They found GC Strategies. They were the best among those that they were looking at, and they recommended GC Strategies. This is their sworn affidavit with the court. With respect to contracting authority, I think that is there are many sides to that question. So in terms of what your delegation limits are, you can be the contracting authority and the technical authority. So for smaller contracts, departments such as CBSA can be both contracting authority and technical authority. But for larger contracts, it was exceeding your authority, which was the case for most contracts with ArriveCAN. It exceeded the agency's authority. Then Mr. Otano, in that case, is correct. We would have been the technical authority, and the contracting authority would have been PSPC.
Okay,
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, how much time? Thank you.
We're actually past time, but I thought it was important that we let Mr. Doan finish that because it's very important. We're now going to take our 10-minute suspension. We'll be back in 10. We are back in session. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. We're starting with Mr. Brock for 5 minutes. Then we'll have Mr. Jawari. Go ahead, Mr. Brock.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to text messages, Mr. Doan, from October of 2022. I'm rather good at running my mouth. My issue is what I want to say versus what I can say. I have to stay in my lane. In my opening round with you, sir, I opined what a literal interpretation would be, what I believe most Canadians would take from that text exchange. I will give you a little bit of latitude, sir, to explain yourself. Specifically, I like an explanation as what you want to say versus what you can say. What did you mean by that, sir, in your text exchange with Mr. McDonald?
Thank you for the question. I don't remember that text exchange again, and I wonder why Mr. McDonald would still have that text with him after leaving the agency. So, having said that,
If I could stop with respect, the issue is not whether you recall it. The issue is why you would ask why Mr. McDonald would retain it. That wasn't the question. These are your text messages. It is a snapshot in time. One would have thought these are pressing issues that would still be germane on your mind. I appreciate you have health issues, but clearly you have a lawyer, so you prepared for this meeting. Correct me if I'm wrong. Correct Canadians if they're wrong. The interpretation is you cannot be honest with this committee because you're being held back from telling us the truth. So let me help you. Who was directing you not to give committee the full truth and nothing but the truth? You being the vice president at the time, would it have been Mr. Osowski or Miss O'Gorman?
Nobody was directing me to not be truthful. And in terms of saying what I want to say, sometimes, and as I want to do here, I stick to the facts. I don't conjecture. I don't give opinion. I'm not here to give opinions. So the question there, and these are alleged texts, I must say. I don't have these texts. These are alleged from the same individual.
Let me stop you right there. Don't go there. Don't suggest for 1 minute. These are fabricated text messages. By doing so, sir, you are now impugning the integrity and the character of the source of this information. If you got an issue with this, my suggestion is you go back to your phone and you scroll back to your communications with Mr. McDonald, or furthermore, if that is gone, talk to your service provider, because service providers retain up to 10 years worth of text messages. So with respect, don't go there. Don't use the word alleged. These are your words, and I've given you the opportunity to explain yourself. I'll ask one further time. Why did you say you could not give us the full goods?
I did not say I could not give you full goods. And with respect, Mr. Chair, the same individual has taken very strong liberties of impugning my reputation and going as far as saying I faked a heart attack. So my apologies if I do take offense to allegations, because there have been many allegations made against me.
Mr. Doan, I'm moving on. You got counsel with you. You've indicated you're not under any investigation. You've indicated you're not under internal investigation. You're not under police investigation. Why do you have a lawyer with you?
I believe everybody is allowed counsel. I believe other witnesses that have appeared here have counsel as well. And given the harm that's already been done to my reputation, both here and on social media, I think it is wise for me.
Is the CBSA currently paying for your legal fees?
Yes, they are.
How much have you submitted so far?
I'm not done, so I've not submitted anything.
You've submitted no bills?
I've submitted bills for previous attendance, but not for this one.
And how much has your legal counsel billed for his or her services in assisting you? Just the number, please.
The last one was $5,000.
$5,000?
Approximately, I can get the
Okay.
specific number and invoice.
for a 2-hour appearance, okay? And what about the first invoice?
It would be approximately less than 5,000. I can get that invoice as well.
Maybe 4,000? Will you provide
And that
both, will you provide both invoices to committee?
I certainly can.
Will you
but
provide
whatever.
the current invoice to committee as well, that what he or she is charging you for today's appearance?
I can provide that information.
That is our time. Mr. Jouari, please.
Thank you. So, Mr. Doan, let me ask you the following question. Do you believe the text that is being referred to and was sent to us is a text that you were engaged in conversation with Mr. McDonald?
I do not recall. So that's why I say alleged. I do not recall. I'm not denying that these occurred. As I said, I was at the time had a good relationship with Mr. McDonald, and that was would have been texting a lot. I do not recall a text that I sent 2 or over 2 years ago. I sent hundreds of texts today.
Possibility that that exchange may have happened.
It is possible.
Okay, so assuming that that possibility exists, you had referred to the ministers at that time. You did not specifically name any minister, but let me be very specific. Did at any time, directly or indirectly, Minister Mendicino at that time and MP Marco Mendicino now influence or ask you to throw anybody on the bus or make a decision on any of the solutions that CBSA was going through? Yes or no? Just yes or no?
No.
No. Thank you. Okay. So you also said, and I just want to clarify because we've already asked for the production of documents. You said the folder that you held, you uploaded into the network, and then you downloaded it, and it was during the download that it was corrupted, and that issue was resolved. So therefore, that folder is available on the network, and we are asking for that folder to be, the emails on that folder to be made available, correct?
Un point de clarification, je ne sais.
Point of clarification. I don't know if it was resolved. I don't know if the agency during its investigations were able to recover those files. So that's the only point of clarification I have to make on what you just said.
Okay, but the likelihood of somebody uploading a file from their personal laptop from their work laptop into their network, that file must be available because there was no corruption happening at that time.
Yes, that would be correct and the normal understanding.
Okay, so no ministerial intervention. You acknowledge the possibility of having had that conversation with Mr. McDonald, and also you've guided us to a source that we could look at those emails. You don't recall how many they are. Apparently witnesses have made claims, but as soon as we look at the files, we'll be able to understand the nature of the content as well as the numbers, correct?
Yes, and even further than that, an ATIP into the agency would reveal, not even if there were emails that were no longer available on my laptop, an ATIP would reveal all emails that I would have sent and received to anybody at the agency or any other department.
Asking indirectly us to do an ATIP for that. Okay, got the message. Now, going back and looking at the decision that was made by for GC strategy for ArriveCAN, you also referred to the statement of fact to Mr. McDonald and Mr. Utano, and the fact that they had claimed that they were involved in making that decision, correct?
That is from the affidavit from the federal court. And in the same federal court case, there was a decision, and at paragraph 6 of their decision, the court noted that Mr. Utano and Mr. McDonald were responsible for the initial execution and technical delivery of the ArriveCAN application. That was part of the court's recent decision.
With about 30 seconds to go. Do you believe that the reason that Mr. Utano and Mr. McDonald was trying to block the release of those documents was because of the nature of the testimony that they had provided?
I participate in every single investigation, review, and audit that I've asked to because I have nothing to hide. So I've not tried to stop any investigation, review, or audit, and I don't understand or I'm not making any assumptions on why somebody would want to stop an investigation if they had nothing to hide.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mrs. Vignola, please.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Doan, I was thinking again about your previous testimony earlier today. Am I mistaken to think that the preparation of strategies to fill needs and to provide tools were the most interesting parts of your job from a personal perspective? Is that what you preferred? Yes, it's something that I like, being a technologist. In simple terms, I was using my knowledge to resolve business problems. That's it. For those who were not tech savvy, but I also like the operational part. There's a technical problem at the customs. How can we resolve the issue? I also like that. Very well. Did you receive any courses on process management and human resource management? Yes. First of all, as a new public servant, I had to take numerous courses. When you become an exec, you also have to take many courses, and some of them are mandatory for us to be able to receive our delegations, be they financial delegations or human resource delegations. As I noted in the AG's report, is a recommendation that is now followed by CBSA leadership. Procurement and contracting courses are now mandatory for everyone, even if they've taken them already. Question, am I mistaken by saying that if you had to choose between managing and supervising teams or resolving problems, finding strategies to meet needs, you will choose to meet needs rather than manage teams? That's not really something that you like. Am I mistaken? And there's no wrong answer. It depends on your personality. One leads to another. We need to be able to manage people, mentor, prepare the next generation of DGs and techs. At the same time, I can also deal with the other part that I like, find strategies and solutions. So at my level, I'm the one who does coding. Maybe I'm not the one who does contracting directly, people below me, but I like managing teams. I like teaching people to learn from their errors. I like to help people with their careers.
Mr. Backrack, please.
Mr. Doan, have you read the Auditor General's report?
Yes, I have.
And do you agree with her findings when it comes to the ArriveCAN procurement?
I agree with all of her findings as well as that of the OPO.
Mr. Chair, I wonder if I could use a couple of my minutes to dig into this question of how we're going to get these emails that seem to be matter of some interest. And I understand there was a request for the IT ticket related to Mr. Doan's request for his emails to be restored. But that's separate from a request for the emails themselves. And I just wonder if we might have some advice from the clerk or from someone on how we can go about that. If we could simply request the backup file of all of the emails, and whether that's going to be prohibitively difficult given the translation requirements.
Are you looking for just emails regarding ArriveCAN, every email, which I assume is going to be a fair amount, what period?
Yeah, I think the emails pertinent to this study are the ones that we're after. I'm just not sure whether it's more efficient to get the entire email file or what the process could be. Now that we know that the emails exist and they're relevant to the study, it just seems like we should go through the step of asking for them formally.
I think we may have asked. I mean, we can look into it and certainly we can take it up, but there seems to be general will from the committee to seek those. We can finalize for sure what we've asked for and is waiting for translation, and then bring it up our first thing Monday meeting and just ask for an order, production order for that. Well, I'm thinking because I'm not sure we're going to exactly find out right now what we've asked for, because we've asked for so many things on this particular issue. Mr. Baird, if you recall, happy to have you just interject.
Well, sure. The existence of the data is the subject of investigation. So, of course, we fully support getting the emails, but it might expedite the process if we just ask if a backup exists. And if the answer is yes, then we could send for the files. Because we don't know the date. It would be tough to filter like the date range and the like. This is a specific backup file. We just don't have the specifics of it.
Why don't we leave it with the clerk and myself, and we'll follow up with CBSA about what Mr. Barrett's commenting. We'll double check about what we've already asked for.
A motion along those lines. It could be very simple. That the committee reach out to CBSA and Shared Services Canada and ask whether an intact backup of Mr. Doan's emails exists. So moved.
Are we fine with that, colleagues?
Yes.
If I can add,
yeah,
Mr. Doan indicated that it was one file which included all of these emails. So maybe add that piece to it.
Sure, good point. Want to add to that, or we can move on?
Like I think
Okay.
we're getting into semantics around in what condition the files exist or in what format they exist.
We'll leave it with the clerk to reach out to Shared Services and CBSA, and hopefully we'll have an answer Monday, and then we can move forward from there. Perfect. Mr. Genuis, please.
Thank you, Chair. My colleague, Mr. Brock, and others have spoken about a series of text messages between Mr. Doan and Mr. McDonald. These are two central figures in this issue, and Mr. Doan seems to be sort of disputing the potential veracity of these text messages. I wonder, Mr. Doan, if you would be willing to share with the committee all of your text messages with Mr. McDonald. I think that would be quite revealing and help us to probably identify other key facts of what has gone on. Would you be able to provide that to the committee?
I'll go through my phones and work with Shared Services and Treasury Board to see what I can recover. Yes.
That was a bit of an imprecise answer. Will you provide the text messages, and are the text messages available, or have they been corrupted through file transfer and DIYs on your phone as well?
No, there was no corruption, but when you change departments, when you take your phone with you, that the common practice is the new department wipes your phone and configures it for the new department.
Okay, well, I think it might be simpler if the committee just agreed to send for those text messages from you, as well as from Mr. McDonald, as well as from the government and the service provider. So we're essentially soliciting that information from everyone who has them. Is there any objection from the committee to that?
No, from when? Starting when?
Well,
August 20.
Compared to what we've asked for, I don't think all of the text messages between these two individuals would be too exhaustive, and I suspect it would be useful information.
Right. What I'm asking for is from what date? August 1990, August 2021.
Well, when did people start using cell phones? Sure, 1990.
No, you know what I mean. Like starting January 2020, starting the beginning of the pandemic.
Well, okay, from 2018 until present.
Sure. You fine with that? Everyone? Perfect. So be it.
In terms of these text messages, you said my issue, according to these messages, my issue is what I want to say versus what I can say. Can't throw FAC under the bus, can't throw ministers under the bus. Is there information that you would have said that you can't say that that would be that would cast ministers in a negative light? Because we've been told that ministers haven't been involved in these discussions at all, and yet you seem to imply in these text messages that you know something about ministers that would that they wouldn't want shared at committee.
No, there isn't.
There isn't. So would you have said something like that, or implied that there was something in a conversation with Mr. McDonald?
I think I answered that when I was answering another questions. If the question is why there were so many changes, why does it cost as much, is because we were meeting the needs of other departments.
Question. That's not the question. The question is about ministers. We have text messages, the Mr. Cameron, between Mr. Cameron and you that say you can't throw ministers under the bus. And your issue is what you want to say versus what you can say. That would imply that you would like to say something that would cast ministers in a negative light, and you feel that you can't say it. But you're telling us now that you would have nothing to say regarding ministers one way or the other. So which is it? Were ministers involved or not? And if they weren't, what are we to make of these text messages?
Ministers were not involved, and I can't throw people under the bus. It goes against my integrity and my approach. I didn't throw Mr. McDonald under the bus last time I was at committee under oath for 2.5 hours.
You're just not answering the question. And
I am answering the question.
No, witnesses have to answer the question. That's how this works here. You said my issue is what I want to say versus what I can say. What I want to say versus what I can say. So what is it that you want to say that you can't say to this committee, sir?
I can only imagine what I wanted to say. So I could say I was very frustrated. I was very tired. I was working 7 days a week. I was frustrated that after what I thought was something that met the needs at the time was now being questioned, my integrity and the cost and how we went about it. That's what I wanted to say. We were working around the clock. You're
still not answering the question. What you want to say regarding FAC and ministers? What is it that you want to say regarding FAC and ministers?
Can you reread this text to me that I would have written?
Sure. If we can stop the clock.
We'll have to wait for the next round for that. So we're at our time. We have Mr. Baines, and then we're going to do our last 5-minute suspension. Mr. Baines.
Mr. Doan, so you've indicated that you're being forthright, you're cooperating with all and every investigation that's taking place. Can you walk us through like what you've been cooperating with, who's been contacting you, which investigations, which departments have been talking to you?
Oui, ça me ferait absolument plaisir de répondre.
Yes, I would like to answer that question.
I've met with the Office of the Auditor General for the report that was eventually tabled. So I met with not the Auditor General herself, but her team. I also met with the internal investigators at CBSA, both on the ArriveCAN investigation, and then more pointedly in the same meeting with the investigators, I was asked questions about the alleged email deletions. So those are the individuals that I've met with and cooperated with so far.
So the IT employee complaint that came from CBSA said that you permanently destroyed emails and other documents. So that's untrue? You've indicated today that they never get
the allegation is the specific allegation was I moved files that resulted in the loss of emails. I also find it interesting that the timing of this allegation that comes out my dates are not specific, but at least 8-9 months after the event, and fully felt so strongly about wrongdoing that they waited 8-9 months once all of this is unfolding in the news and in the media to then flag that they had concerns of something that happened 8-9 months ago.
Okay, so the Auditor General's criticism of lack of record keeping regarding ArriveCAN and improper documentation persisted over a long period of time. Can you identify how long that's been going on?
I believe the scope of the audit and review in the report was during since the pandemic began, and unfortunately, I agree wholeheartedly. The documentation and processes that we did during the pandemic were insufficient. Technologists in general are not great at documenting their code, and others in normal times, and in times of pandemic, unfortunately, we did not document these key decisions well enough. And in hindsight, a lesson I learned is, as counterintuitive as it may be, during a crisis when the house is on fire is exactly the time that you want to document every single decision that is made, so to avoid situations that we find ourselves in now. So the documentation wasn't as rigorous around decisions and others that it should have been.
We heard testimony from Mr. Firth, his partner, that the processes haven't changed for over 20 years. Is that accurate?
I couldn't comment on Mr. First's opinion of processes.
You know the processes. You've been there, you said, for 25 years yourself. So have they changed over the time?
The tools available to the public service for record keeping, repositories have evolved absolutely over time. They've gotten better. Tools around collaboration for things like Office 365 and the cloud have improved. The processes themselves have been modernized through directives like the Directive on Service and Digital from the Treasury Board. So they evolve, perhaps not at the speed that we need them to, but they have evolved over, I believe your question was 20 years, as they have evolved and changed over 20 years.
Has that modernization allowed for, misfiling or these kinds of intricate recordings to be found, that this is missing, certain things are missing and they're not there?
There's always room for improvement. It doesn't matter if it's process or technology or both. There's always room for improvement. And unfortunately, there's a trust and verify as well. If you are supposed to use certain processes, it doesn't matter if it's contracting or procurement. But if somebody nefarious for whatever reason doesn't want to, there are sometimes ways to circumvent it. As technology evolves, there's less and less ways, and there are more controls in place, which I believe CBSA has started putting in place controls and checks and balances that perhaps should have been there during the pandemic. But yes, the controls and the technology and processes are improving as we learn from these events.
Thank you, gentlemen. That brings us to the end of this round. We'll take a 5-minute suspension and we'll be back for the final round. Much for your continued patience. We're back to the final round. We have Mr. Genuis, I understand, or Mr. Brock for 5. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks, Chair. Some loose ends, Mr. Doan. The issue regarding your legal fees, has that been paid by CBSA?
Yes, it has.
I didn't hear that. Thank you. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Now, earlier today, sir, you referenced some affidavits, and I think you were referencing affidavits pertaining to both Cameron McDonald and Antonio Utano. Is that correct?
Oui, c'est correct.
Yes.
You specifically raised those affidavits because you claim, at least your evidence today was, that there was evidence in those affidavits to suggest that it wasn't you who selected GC Strategies, but rather either Mr. McDonald or Mr. Utano. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Do you have those affidavits before you, sir, in that room?
I have excerpts of it. I obtained it through my legal counsel.
Okay, on the record, can you specifically identify what paragraph that relates to any evidence to suggest that it was Mr. McDonald or Mr. Utano who selected GC Strategies? Just the paragraph, please.
Paragraph 12 from Mr. Utano's affidavit. I was involved in exploring options to be presented.
I don't need you to read it out, sir. I don't need you to read it out. Just paragraph 12 for Mr. Utano. Is that correct?
15. Paragraph 15 from Mr. Utano speaks
Paragraph
to Deloitte.
15. Okay. Is there any other paragraph that speaks to that?
As well as paragraph 14 and 15 from Mr. McDonald's affidavit.
Okay. And I'm going to be asking you, sir, to forward the full affidavits to this committee, and we'll specify what sort of time frame. You have no problem doing that?
Nope.
Okay. Moving on to the allegations regarding deleted emails. I understand that the complaint from a whistleblower, the IT whistleblower, submitted that complaint to Michael Lafleur, the CBSA's Executive Director of Professional Integrity. Is that your understanding, sir?
That's what I read in the Globe and Mail.
And that was sent in December of 2023. Has Mr. Lafleur spoken to you?
Yes, he has.
Okay. In relation to that complaint?
Yes, he has.
Have you received a copy of that complaint?
I have not.
Have you requested a copy of that complaint and it has not been received?
I have not requested a copy.
And why not?
Because I know the allegations are false.
That makes zero sense. You're under investigation. A complaint is levied against you with very serious damning facts that you willfully, intentionally deleted relevant emails in relation to the selection of GC Strategies. And your evidence is, I know it to be false, but I didn't even bother to ask for the misconduct report. That is incapable of belief, sir?
I would refer you to CBSI then.
Sorry?
I would refer you to CBSI. I did not make the request for it.
That is mind-boggling, sir. That truly is. Do you understand the content of the allegation, sir? Let me help you with that.
I would like to remind the chair that
Sir, it's my time. Sir, it is my time. The complaint says as follows, that you approached this IT employee directly without going around proper protocol for requesting technical support. You said that some files were lost when you attempted to move files between your laptop and the network drive in preparation for a new computer. What Mr. Doan was telling me or saying made no sense. I've never heard of a VP or an individual who receives VIP treatment in regards to IT-related tasks, taking it upon themselves to move files or organize information in the way he suggested. The complainant said Mr. Doan said he was acting on the advice of CBSA's IT team, but this employee expressed skepticism. Who on the team gave you that advice? Identify names, please.
I can find the name.
Is it one name or is it several names?
The initial person I identified that my battery would have be giving up soon or would have an issue, I could identify that name. And perhaps one of the reasons I didn't ask for anything is I've been on medical leave for the past 6 months, and on a doctor's advice, I'm supposed to avoid stress would be probably a reason why I've not wanted to engage any further on an investigation about myself.
But you'll supply the committee with a name?
I will supply the committee
Or
with
names? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Atwin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Doan, just for context around these text messages, they were given to us by Mr. McDonald. And he's also sent an email that was to Miss Lucy Desprez and Sammy Hanouche. And in this, he alleges that you and Kelly Belanger worked to set him up. Who is Kelly Belanger, and is that a fair characterization?
Je comprendrai pas dans quelle situation.
I do not understand under what circumstances that could have happened. At that time, Mr. McDonald was a colleague with whom I had good relations. For Kerry Belanger, she was DG and later promoted.
And Deputy CIO later on.
Thank you. And just moving on from there, speculation about this lost data or emails is that it would perhaps detail maybe intimate relationship or involvement with GC strategies and perhaps hold the key to who made the selection for the CBSA contract for ArriveCAN. Is that what we're going to find if we get access to these emails?
I think evidence and testimony that keeps coming out is pretty clear. I have no relationship with GC Strategies. I heard Mr. Firth confirm that he had never met me outside of the office, yet he had met Mr. McDonald and other witnesses here. So from Mr. Firth himself, we do not have a relationship. The same was part of Bottler's messages. There was no relationship in one of the social media tweets I saw from Bottler. Mr. Firth couldn't even pronounce my 4-letter last name. And in terms of some of the findings of who's accountable, I already talked about the court decision, and I do refer you to paragraph 1.41 and 1.43 of the OEG report that says, and she also testified that the individuals at the executive direct level who exercise their delegated authority into entering contracts, and that in exercising their delegated authority, they bear the responsibility and accountability for the decisions and actions. So no, you will not find anything that contradicts what I've said today in terms of my relationship with GC Strategies or in the context of ArriveCAN.
Thank you. And in your opening statement and just now, you've alluded to the fact that perhaps Mr. Cameron McDonald or Anthony Utano did have relationships with GC Strategies prior to the pandemic. You referenced specifically. Do you have any evidence to demonstrate that for our committee?
I have no evidence, and I continue to, and that's why last time I refused to blame Mr. McDonald. But what I do have is just testimony and what I've seen from publicly available information. I'm still on medical leave. As I prepared for this committee, I did not reach into the CBSA to access files or documents. I limited myself to what was publicly available, so committee hearings, Globe and Mail, and other things, while prioritizing my health. But from everything I've seen and heard so far, including meetings at Lansdowne and other places, the relationship would be there. I think there was also recent testimony at PACP from KPMG that also made some allegations around relationships and who directed what business where.
Thank you. And Mr. McDonald and Anthony Utano have also been referred to as whistleblowers by some of my colleagues across the way. And they've made it clear to us that they feel, personally attacked for having spoken out about what they saw as wrongdoing. Is that a fair characterization that they're whistleblowers kind of speaking truth to power in this situation?
Given what I've suffered through, both in terms of my mental and career, I tend to go to what various members have called the original whistleblowers here in Bottler, and Bottler were pretty clear in their opinion as to who the people were who had relationships with GC strategies dating back years. So I would characterize, as other members here have in the past, Bottler as the whistleblowers, and others I can't speak to how they're being characterized and why.
Okay. And just to be clear, I mean, you mentioned this dinner after the conference with AWS as far as the cloud service provider for ArriveCAN. So I'll ask you really directly, have you ever been given or offered outside of salary money or favors or gifts as a result of contractor relationships with regards to ArriveCAN?
No, c'est jamais arrivé.
That never happened.
Okay. I would like to know too, is it normal for you and other vice presidents at CBSA to decide on a technical procurement approach without knowing the names or backgrounds and competencies of all the vendors involved?
It does happen. It depends on the nature of the contract, the software, the service that is occurring. As I mentioned, I have 1,400 employees. We're managing 190 enterprise systems. If I had to get engaged in every single contract, every single discussion, I would completely bog down the process and the system.
Thanks, Ms. Atwood. Mrs. Vignola, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Doan, as far as you know, during the contracting process and during renewal of the ArriveCAN contract, we did shared services and PSPC send out any notices or questions regarding award of the contract by your teams. All I know is what I learned recently from the AG's report and the testimony. What I understand that PSPC in particular had question. I'm sorry, you were not personally aware. No one informed you. No, thank you. Do you know the contract award process for SPAC? Answer, I have an idea, but it's been a while since I have not used that. Question, does CBSA has its own specific rules when it comes to contracting? Answer, we follow the same policies and regulations as imposed by the Treasury Board. And from what I've heard, more controls have been imposed following the AG's recommendations. Thank you. As a manager, how did you make sure that people under your responsibility were implementing the regulations concerning contracting as well as ethics rules? When we look at the fundamental principles, it relates to your previous questions. Also, executives are people who have taken lots of courses on the code of conduct and so on. So it's all to find out whether they brought things to my attention.
Plus grande faille serait...
Was your greatest problem was that you were too trusting and somebody maybe took advantage of that?
One brief answer.
Say,
that was one of the mistakes I made during the pandemic.
Thank you, Mrs. McNulta. Mr. Backrack?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Doan, you mentioned in a previous response that I believe it was Mr. Firth had difficulty with your four-letter last name. And I noticed that committee members have used 3 or 4 different versions this evening. At one point, the Liberals just chose to sort of lower their voices when they got to your name as a strategy. And we should have done this right at the beginning, but how do you pronounce your last name? And which committee member got it closest?
Thank you for that. Listen, my name is.
We're out of time there. I'll go ahead, Mr. Doan.
I'm Vietnamese. My name's fairly simple. It's Minh. I've heard it, but every single way. Often I hear Ming, and I ask myself, where in M-I-N-H do you hear G? But I've kind of just developed a little bit of a shell to that. My last name is Doan, so Vietnamese because of the French influence. We pronounce it Doan, but I'm used to being called Don as well, similar to the I believe a hockey player, but I don't watch hockey, but I believe there's a famous hockey player with the last name Don. But I prefer Doan, but I totally accept Don as well.
Answering our questions this evening, Mr. Doan.
Thanks, Mr. Backrack. Appreciate the levity today. Well done. We'll finish up with Mr. Genuis and then Mr. Sousa. Go ahead, Mr. Genuis.
Chair, that last round was light but revealing. My NDP colleague asked the witness how he pronounces his last name, and he literally consumed the entire round, offering a very roundabout response to that. I'm going to try again to get very precise answers to precise questions that are a bit more of a serious nature, and I hope the witness will shift his approach and be direct in his responses, because we have taken additional steps to insist on answers from witnesses that have not been direct and responsive to important questions. I don't really find your story about sort of the DIY accident on your computer because the IT folks were too busy to assist a senior executive remotely plausible. I want to go back to the text messages. These are text messages that the committee received from Mr. McDonald, and you said you don't recall them, but you haven't denied them or said they sound out of character. The text messages we have received include you saying, my issue is what I want to say versus what I can say. Can't throw FAC under the bus, can't throw ministers under the bus, implying that you might want to, but you can't. Sir, do those sound like texts you might have sent, or do they seem implausible that you would have sent? A simple answer.
They seem plausible. I don't believe in throwing people under the bus.
Sorry, they do or they don't?
They do.
They do seem plausible.
I do not believe in throwing people under the bus.
Sorry, do they seem plausible or not?
They do seem plausible.
They do seem plausible. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So if they are plausible, then what would you have liked to say that would throw ministers under the bus?
Je pense que c'est pas la suite.
What I would like to say was that I was simply trying to express my frustration after 2 years of work, and then I come here and I'm asked why we did X, Y, being told it was useless work.
Two of us. I'm also frustrated because you just told us that it's plausible that you would have talked about how you would like to but can't throw ministers under the bus. I'm just wondering what information you had or have that you could have shared and didn't feel you could share, but could have shared, that would have effectively cast blame on ministers. What is that information?
So perhaps to clarify, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. It doesn't matter if it's FAC or ministers. That's not something I believe in doing.
That's not the point. The point is I want you to tell the committee the truth. Without fear or favor, I want you to tell the committee the truth. What you implied very strongly in these text messages to Mr. McDonald is that you had information that you could not say, that if said would have the effect of casting blame on ministers and on FAC. Now, you said it was plausible that you would have sent those text messages. So what is that information?
That implied, it's implied by who?
by you in text messages that you sent to Mr. McDonald that have been provided to this committee.
That's not how I interpret those text messages.
This is what the text messages say, sir. And we're getting to time without you having it provided any answer. You said, my issue is what I want to say versus what I can say. Can't throw FAC under the bus, can't throw ministers under the bus. I've read these a dozen times so far. Could you explain to us?
That. I can't throw people under the bus.
Right. But you said before that, my issue is what I want to say versus what I can say. So you were saying there are certain things you can't say that you want to say. So what are the things you can't say that you want to say that, if said, would cast blame on ministers of the Crown?
Hang on, let me try to follow that one. Mr. Chair, I'm trying to answer. What I can't say is express my frustration in committee because we're here to talk about facts and evidence. So I can't express how tired I was at the time. I can't express how frustrated I am that my entire teams worked so hard to get then have this application.
You know, the problem is this isn't a question about your feelings or your frustration. This is an important issue of the public interest, and I'm trying to get an answer from you about what you said in these text messages. So, Chair, I would like to ask that the committee instruct the clerk and analyst to prepare a report to the House, which the Chair shall table forthwith, outlining the potential breach of privilege concerning Minh Doan's refusal to answer those questions which the committee agreed to put to him and his prevarication in answering others. I think it's clear why this is necessary.
Excuse me, just 2 seconds. This is a debatable motion put forward. I'll start speaking this. Did you want to comment on it first? Then we'll go to Mr. Kuzmierczak. Mr. Kuzmierczak? Sorry, your hand is up, Mr. Kuzmierczak.
Yes, I do apologize. I'm just waiting for Mr. Sorry, my earphones have been disconnected. 1 second.
Why don't
we can just go to?
We'll go to Ms.
Mr. Jen. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I can appreciate what Mr. Jennings is trying to do here, but I do feel that the witness was trying to be as forthcoming as possible. Some of the questions he very clearly answered several times, and then was told to say he actually wasn't answering the question as directly as he had been. I really don't want to see us in another situation where we're calling someone to the bar for admonishment in the House. It's quite I think an embarrassing affair, and I don't think that we need to go down that road again. I do think that Mr. Doan is being as truthful as he can with us. I actually don't think he has been, trying to mislead this committee in any way. So I wouldn't agree to that. I think that he's tried his best in the opportunity that we gave him was 3 hours of grilling. I wouldn't agree with this motion.
Mr. Kuzmierczak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the patience as I got my headphones plugged back in. We've listened today to Mr. Doan provide 3 hours of grueling testimony and received tough questions from all members around this committee. Mr. Doan has appeared here under difficult circumstances, knowing that he shared with us some very personal information, which is regarding his health condition, and that should not be taken lightly, and was here for 3 hours, fielding very, very tough questions from all of the members of this committee, and I commend him for that. He has answered every question to the best of his ability and forthright, and not only that, but has offered to provide additional evidence and information, and again. He tried at every occasion, was forthright with his answers. What he didn't provide is he didn't verbatim answer questions that the Conservative MPs tried to put in his mouth. And that's what we just saw over the last number of rounds of questions, is the Conservative MPs were trying to put answers and words in the mouth of Mr. Doan. And so this motion that's being brought forward is based on the fact that Mr. Doan simply provided his own answer, in his own words. And for that reason, my colleague from the Conservative side is now taking this next step. And again, Mr. Doan has been here for 3 hours answering questions, even though, again, he has been doing this under a very difficult situation. And furthermore, I think it's important to note as well, to add to the difficulty of and how challenging this situation is, there are investigations that are currently being undertaken right now. And we know that the RCMP is active, and there's a number of other investigations that are being conducted both internally by the CBSA and a number of investigations that are being conducted by other agencies. And so again, very difficult conditions. Mr. Doan has answered every question that came before him. And again, 3 hours of testimony. And so I share my colleague's concern with this next step, and I do disagree wholeheartedly with the mischaracterization by my colleague from the Conservative Party that Mr. Doan has been avoiding answering questions here. He's been here for 3 years, or excuse me, for 3 hours answering those questions.
Mr. Sousa, please.
Yeah, listen, I just want to reaffirm that we may not necessarily appreciate the responses, but that doesn't mean that he's not forthcoming with his response. We may not like to hear and interpret the response, but he is responding, and he's making every effort to do so. I had another 5 minutes of which I was going to continue to pursue it. I say we put it to a vote, and let's continue.
Well, we can't go to a vote while we still have a voting list unless I have Mr. Brock, then Ms. Vignola, then Mr. Jouari, and Mr. Barrett. We can go to vote if everyone wants to give up their time, or otherwise we're with Mr. Brock.
Vote?
Brock, go ahead, Mr. Brock.
I'm withdrawing. I'm withdrawing.
I have Mrs. Vignola.
Je me retire mon.
I'm withdrawing. My opinion is already, or rather, I'm also withdrawing. My opinion has already been stated by other MPs briefly. It's not because we don't like answers that it means the person has not answered. The person answered. I have pages and pages of notes. We are light years away from what we saw with other witnesses before. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Jouari.
I'm going to withdraw.
Mr. Barrett.
Yeah, Chair, I would just say a couple things very quickly with respect to colleagues' comments on Mr. Genuis's motion. Mr. Doan lied. So I don't know if he was lying then or if he's lying now, but there are several examples. I see everyone's withdrawing, so we can bring this to a vote. Let's bring it to a vote. But I read the evidence from a previous appearance by him where he said one thing, and then today he said the exact opposite thing with respect to the then saying he was in the middle of a competitive process with Treasury Board, today him saying not. Also, varying answers. He went through a range of answers on whether or not companies were associated with the presentations in the slide decks. There were no logos. There were no companies associated. Oh, they changed over time. They disappeared at some point. Well, which is the answer? We got multiple different answers. And this is a problem that we have that, pardon me?
Sorry.
So
My bad. My apologies. Go
So
ahead.
this is a problem that we have. We've come as parliamentarians to just accept that people can come before us and that they can lie and that they can refuse to answer questions and that there's no consequence. Why would anyone come here and tell the truth if there's no consequence for it? I can tell you, I was absolutely not embarrassed by the questioning of Mr. Firth when he was admonished at the bar. He was found by the House of Commons, by Canada's Parliament, to be in contempt. That wasn't a conservative smear job. That was a failure by that individual. It was a failure of his character. It was a failure of his integrity, and he was rightly admonished. The only thing that's a shame is that there weren't more severe consequences for that contempt that individual showed for Canadians who elected us to come here and to get answers for them. So when we hold people to no standard, then we get no quality from people who are looking to protect themselves instead of being accountable to the people who were sent here by Canadians. We each represent about 100,000 people, and they expect us to be honest and forthright, and the same is true for witnesses who come before committee. The witness today swore an oath, and it is black and white. He lied. He lied. So if it's uncomfortable for people to for members of the other parties, if it's uncomfortable for Liberals, I know Mr. Kusmaricek said that it's because Conservatives want to put words in Mr. Doan's mouth. Well, let's just look at his words, where he said one thing at one meeting and something different at today's meeting. So were you lying then, or are you lying now? Those are the only, that's the binary that we're left with. To say nothing of the fact that it's absolutely preposterous, his claim about how the data was corrupted on his laptop. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And if people don't feel like, if members of the committee don't feel like it was an attempt to insult their intelligence, take another listen to what he offered. And we should, as a committee, bring someone from the computer shop down Rideau Street to come here and tell us why it's absolutely absurd. I'm not going to involve the professionals who work in IT in this building who would tell you it's absurd. Control C, Control V, you've got to be kidding me. More like Control X and delete. It's behavior unbecoming of a public servant, and it's absolutely unacceptable behavior by a witness coming before a standing committee of a House of Parliament. Absolutely unacceptable. So does that warrant a conversation by the full House when the privileges of parliamentarians are breached? Absolutely it does. And the remedy is something that should be decided on by the House. I'm absolutely not in the least bit disappointed or ashamed, as other colleagues suggested, about how someone who lied to Canadians was simply asked to answer questions at the bar truthfully and to accept a verbal admonishment. And with respect to the quote unquote grueling conditions today, kid gloves, 5 and 10-minute breaks, and appearing virtually with counsel, and he still couldn't even tell the truth. And he still couldn't even tell the truth. And I'm not sure what Mr. Sousa's comment was. Maybe he wanted to offer us something about his experience with deleted emails in the Ontario legislature, but we can look at court records for that. I have nothing further to add.
We'll get to a vote now. Okay.
Sousa.
Okay, we will go to a vote. Recorded vote, I assume.
Ms. Atwin,
Opposed.
Mr. Baines,
No.
Mr. Johari,
Against.
Mr. Kusmirchuk,
No.
Mr. Sousa,
Nope.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Mr. Janice,
Yes.
Mr. Brock,
Yes.
Madame Vignola,
No.
Mr. Backrack.
No.
So yeas pour 3, and nays contre 7.
So defeated. Mr. Sousa.
Minh Doan, are you still there?
Mr. Doan's still there.
All right. Do you have any concerns about Mr. McDonald or Mr. Otano's conduct with contractors during the early days of the pandemic and during the development of the ArriveCAN app?
No, I didn't in the early days of the pandemic or during the development of the ArriveCAN app.
Did you have any dealings with Mr. Watt, a card-carrying conservative from Dalian Enterprises at all?
I don't recall having any meetings with them, but I don't have access to my calendar.
Mr. Doan, would you cooperate with the Public Sector Integrity Commissioner if an investigation was asked?
Yes, of course I would.
Do you know why you're being targeted? Do you know why? What do you think is happening to you right now?
I can't speak on the motivations of others, but you know, I had high esteem of them. I had high regard of them. If they had nothing to hide, they would not have to shift blame to others or try to stop investigations.
I know you were trying to read the affidavits about claims against you. You don't have to read them in its entirety, but how are you? And to my point to my colleague across, Mr. Barrett, what I was suggesting is that I recommend and I commend your ability to answer these questions both in English and in French. And that was my comment to you in regards to that. And if you have anything more to add in regards to the affidavits or anything else that's happening here today, please do.
I thank the chair and the honorable members for the accommodations that were given to me today, including the breaks. As I said at the outset, I have cardiac disease. I'm still on sick leave. My doctor's advice was to avoid stressful situations because they can cause anginas or heart attacks. Now, I have family that I provide for. I have young kids. I'd rather avoid going back to the ICU or even worse. So I want to thank members and the chair for the accommodations. This has been extremely difficult. Somebody, I think, slipped that it was 3 years and not 3 hours. It certainly felt more like 3 years and 3 hours, but I tried to answer with facts, and I will continue to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Doan. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sousa. Very much. Mr. Doan, you're dismissed and we are adjourned.